What's up, friends and fellow card collectors? Card Obvious here, and today I'm just going to touch on 5 things you might know about me. Maybe more than five. I'm trying to get at least five in there. I said I was going to do a response to my own contest, and that's what this is for. But real quick, I want to touch on the actual contest itself. I put out the contest video back on April 7th, so it's been about 3 weeks for everybody to get their responses in. So last night, after it was probably about 1 o'clock in the morning, I went through and made a list of everybody that made contest response videos, everybody that made their comments for the contest, and put it on a document. So unfortunately, everybody that made contest response videos today on the 1st, they will not count. Sorry about that. I really do appreciate you making contest response videos, though. I've enjoyed every single one of them that I've seen so far. I think I've watched them all. So if you made a contest response video today on the 1st, sorry, you will not get an entry into the contest for your video. But however, my challenge to the YouTube community is to keep making these videos. I absolutely enjoy them. You don't have to tag my CH500 tag in there anymore. I really appreciate it. And if you keep making these videos, trust me, the community will really appreciate it as well, as much as myself, because these show a side of us as human beings that help us connect with more people. And I've learned so much about so many people on this. I just want to challenge the community to keep it going. You know, if you haven't made a contest response video, perhaps, make one, not for my contest, but make one for your own content. I find it to be great content. And I encourage any content creators out there that are making YouTube videos about sports cards. Not only about sports cards, if you're in other avenues, if you do fishing videos, if you do car videos, if you're a Magic the Gathering collector, if you do sports videos, if you do gardening videos, cooking videos, whatever, I encourage you to do interesting things about yourself that aren't in your niche. Is that how you say it? Niche. Because I just think it's a great way to connect with your audience as well as other people in the community. So enough rambling about that, and I hope people continue to make these videos, 5 interesting things about themselves. I think it's a great jumping off point for people that don't make content yet but are thinking about it. Maybe once you build up a little bit of an audience, 100 subscribers or so, throw that out there. Let your subscribers know a little bit about you. So without further ado, I'll get into the 5 things about me that I wouldn't call them interesting. For the most part, I find myself to be pretty much a boring person, but I'm pretty sure there's a lot of us out there that think that about ourselves, but everybody has something interesting about them. Boring is a subjective term, and go ahead and put it out there and let other people decide whether it's boring or not, and you don't have to care what they think. So the first thing is, I almost died when I was younger. Now, actually not once but twice. First time when I was 3 years old, I had some sort of malady came over me, where my body would not digest food. I'd take food in and it'd come back out, undigested. I won't go into any further than that, but yeah, so I spent close to a month in the hospital as a 3-year-old, as doctors did all sorts of tests on me. They injected me with, radioactive fluid in my veins to, I guess the MRI machines or whatever they were doing back then. This, back in the early 80s, I don't know what the medical technology was like back then. But yeah, I spent a month in the hospital. I pretty much got all my nutrients through intravenous, and they actually had me in isolation bubbles because they didn't know if I was contagious or what. My earliest memory that I can remember is being in an isolation bubble, and it's kind of a weird early memory, but I remember being inside that bubble and seeing doctors and nurses on the other side of this piece of plastic. It was kind of opaque. It was almost like looking through a semi-clear shower curtain. But you know, I'm still here. So that malady wasn't the end of me. They never determined what I had, and you know, maybe nowadays they've determined what that malady is, but you know, when I was 3, they never determined it, and they had me in isolation for so long. Like my family couldn't even touch me. They had to, you know, reach through the plastic with you know, with like arm gloves to be able to, you know, hold my hand or whatever as a kid. But yeah, that, you know, that had to have been tough on my family, going through that when I was a kid. But you know, one day, my dad went up to the hospital and said, you know, I'm taking my kid home. We'll bring him back. You know, he spent a month in this hospital. Ain't no reason for, you know, him to stay here. He's totally unhappy. Let him just come home for a little while to see his family. And at that point, my dad says, as he was driving me home, I asked him, I wanted a Happy Meal. So he took me to McDonald's, got me a Happy Meal, and I haven't stopped eating Happy Meals since. Can't you tell? So yeah, so that was one point where things were pretty dire for me. But I recovered from that pretty much after he took me home. I never went back to the hospital after that. Now I got better. So the second time that I almost passed away is I was racing my friend. We were walking home from school. I think I was 7 at the time. And this is in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I think this is 3rd Avenue. I think we were on 3rd Avenue and 1st Avenue in Fort Lauderdale. And I was walking home with my friends, and he was my neighbor. And we were like just around the corner from our houses. And we decided we were going to race. So me, being the fool, said 1, 2, 3, go. And I took off running. Ran out in the road. Okay. Didn't look, just ran out in the road. Foolish kid. And as I made it across the street, the grass was wet, and I slipped. And I slipped and fell on my butt. Like I fell backwards. And fell on my butt. And as I fell on my butt, a car swerved and ran over my legs. Like actually ran over, like the front tire went over my legs. So what had happened was, when I ran out in the road, apparently I ran right out in front of this car. The car swerved in the same direction I was running. If I hadn't have slipped, the car would have hit me dead on. But instead I slipped, and the car had swerved enough to where the front tire just ran over my legs. And I was totally 100% uninjured. As a kid, I didn't think nothing of it. I stood up. And like, I was like kind of in a daze, like what just happened? A car just ran over me. But I'm okay. I'm fine, you know. So I stood up, and the woman that was driving it was flipping out, absolutely flipping out, and I do not blame her. She thought she had just killed a child, and it wasn't her fault. It was 100% my fault. She got out, and you know, she was like, "You okay?" And then somebody had seen it happen from their house, and they called 911. So this ambulance shows up. I just wanted to walk home because I felt fine, but I had to wait. The ambulance showed up. They took me to the hospital. I was fine. They did x-rays. Nothing broken. I didn't even have a bruise on me. And yeah, actually, my stepdad put a belt to my butt because I ran out in traffic. Yeah, I was more injured from the whooping than I was from actually getting run over by a car. But that was the second time that was a near-death experience for me as a kid. Pretty wild. I mean, maybe, you know, something out there is looking over me. Maybe I have a purpose while I'm still here. Maybe my purpose will make itself seen, you know, after I'm long gone. But yeah, I mean, I'm grateful to still be here. And that second one was a stupid decision by a kid on my part. And to that, you know, from that day on, I've always made sure, you know, when crossing the street to look. And like, it even makes me nervous to see other kids crossing the street. Like, you know, make sure you look both ways, kid. You know, I know, I've been there. But yeah, so I guess that's one thing. I mean, I could count it for 2 things, but yeah, let's say it's one thing. All right. So second thing, I have a very, very active imagination. When I was a kid, I would tell stories, just random stories off the top of my head about, superheroes and, secret agents and all. I just come up with stuff off the top of my head, and, my mom would always be like, where do you come up with this crap? And like sometimes I try to draw comics, and I never had artistic ability. So I draw these like stickman comics, and they'd be like little movie scenes and action scenes, and like like secret agents running into a building, and they have to save the secret documents before the building blew up and stuff like that. I would have all these little comics written with stick figures. It's not something I pursued as I got older. I kind of lost interest in it, but I always had that overactive imagination. And when I was in high school, one of my English teachers said, you know what, you should try writing. You have all these stories that you make up in your head, but you don't get them down on paper. Well, here's the thing: is I don't like writing. I mentioned before I ran a baseball card blog for a little while, and I did it for a couple years, at least 2-3 years. But the problem is writing always felt like a chore to me. I just never really enjoyed writing all that much. Bonus fact, I've written some poetry, so that makes me wimpy or nerdy in a way. Apologies. But yeah, I've written poetry, I've written short stories, stuff like that, and I never thought they were that good, and I really didn't enjoy the process of it. So one way that I found out that I can use my imagination that wasn't writing was YouTube. And YouTube's a way, when I edit these videos, it's part of me using my imagination in them. When I throw little, snippets in there, it's part of me using my imagination. But that's not the number one thing. Number one thing is tabletop gaming. If you don't know what more specifically tabletop role-playing game. If you don't know what tabletop role-playing games are, if you ever heard of Dungeons and Dragons, that is a tabletop role-playing game. Now, that is probably the most popular, most well-known tabletop role-playing game. However, it is not my favorite. So, I even have some of these nerd dice. These are percentile dice for rolling percentages. It's not my favorite, mainly because when you think about tabletop role-playing games, there's kind of two aspects to it. One is the strategy aspect of it, where you're, min-maxing your stats, and you're, trying to win fights and stuff by, rolling percentages and using strategies to benefit your character the most. That is probably my least favorite part of tabletop role-playing games. Some people, it's their favorite part. I actually enjoy the narrative aspect of it more because it's telling stories. And that fits in with my super overactive imagination. So I tend to find myself playing more narrative-based games where the narrative is more free-flowing and it's not really focused on the strategy or number crunching or anything like that. So that's my preference when it comes to tabletop role-playing games. Just because I love telling stories, I love using my imagination, and there's a lot of great games out there for it. If you've never tried it, try it out. You may have reservations about doing it, or feeling reserved about, maybe I won't tell a good enough story, or what I say is not going to be good enough. It doesn't matter. Just use whatever pops in your imagination, and you may have fun with it. You should try it out. Let's see. So that's two things. Okay. Third thing. There is actually a town in Georgia named after my family. So, my last name is Perkins. There's actually a Perkins, Georgia. It's just north of Millen, Georgia, in Jenkins County. Wouldn't really call it a town. It's got a population of 91. It's more of a blip in the road. It used to be called Perkins Station because there was a railroad station there back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. But yeah, so the first families that lived there, the Perkins community, was actually related to me. So they're actually my kinfolk. Not directly. It's not like I got aunts and uncles and stuff living down there that I know of, but they are relatives of, my last name. Also, there's a road in Burke County, Georgia called Perkins Mill Road. That is actually named after my uncle. There used to be a mill there, a grist mill, that was owned by not my uncle, but my great uncle, my father's uncle. In case you don't know what a grist mill is, it's basically a round stone that it's water powered, like water goes through a water wheel. It turns this huge stone around and it grounds, it grinds, wheat into flour or cornmeal or corn into cornmeal. So there used to be a grist mill there. It was Perkins Grist Mill. And that's where the road named after. Now here's another thing. There's a Perkins Road that comes off of that road. That road's actually named after my father. Once the road was cut in, my father was the first child born on that road and was named Perkins Road. So there's 2 roads in Burke County, Georgia that are directly named after my family. Let's see. Number, what was that, 3? Let's go with number 4. Number 4. I used to be, I've gone through many different genres of music and musical tastes in my life. I grew up a big hip hop head. Growing up in South Florida, huge fan of like Run DMC, Beastie Boys, Rob Bass, the 80s hip hop. My first cassette tape I ever bought was Run DMC. I bought it at a 7-Eleven in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So yeah, I started off listening to hip hop. It was my first genre of music that I truly loved. Is old school hip hop music. LL Cool J, Kool Moe Dee, all them back then. So, I've always loved hip hop even up till now, even though I kind of like fell out of listening to the new stuff because, once you get older and an old miser, you just like listen to what you're comfortable to. The new stuff a lot of times doesn't really appeal to you. Usually the music you listen to in high school is the music that you love for the rest of your life, because it's definitely music during a formative time of your life. But yeah, hip hop has always been, especially old school hip hop, 80s, 90s hip hop's huge to me. Classic rock and oldies. I began to listen to a lot of that when I found my dad's albums. After my dad left, he had left behind albums and tapes and stuff like that, and I used to listen to those, the golden oldies like Buddy Holly and, the Beatles and the Motown groups of the 60s and the Platters and Sam Cooke and all them. So I grew to love that type of music as well. I remember my mom got a CD player, and for like a year we had 1 CD because my mom would never buy more CDs. Back in the 80s, like the dang CD player probably cost her like $300 something, and we had 1 CD, and that CD was Fleetwood Mac Rumors. So I became a Fleetwood Mac fan during that. In high school, I discovered metal and hard rock, and then I liked a lot of the grunge scene from Seattle. Alternative got real big, so I really started to like rock and roll in the 90s when I was in high school. Yeah, and even after that, after high school, I got into the rave scene. So yeah, I was kind of involved in the rave scene. I knew a few DJs and stuff like that, and we hit up raves, and I loved to go out there and dance to the rave scene, and I was part of the rave scene and all that's involved in that. Some of it good and some of it bad. But yeah, definitely moved on from that. That was definitely a fad in my life. Now I just listen to whatever music that makes me nod my head and gives me good positive vibes, and I'm all into it. So what was that, 4 things? Yeah, I'm like 20 minutes into this off the cuff. Ramble. Let's see, what's number 5? I need another thing about myself I could think of. I'm a big environmentalist, so it's kind of weird trying not to bring politics into the spectrum and all that. I guess you can consider me kind of a tree hugger, but I've always been one that loves like things that grow. I don't know, I guess as a kid, like when you see an acorn and you see a tree, a lot of times you don't associate the acorn with the tree as in oh yeah, the acorn fell off that oak tree. But to think that you have something the size of an acorn, like ain't no bigger than this die, a little acorn, you plant it in the ground, and within 50-60 years it's a giant oak tree. Just life that grows is something that's always amazed me. So yeah, I'm kind of an environmentalist. I've always been a big proponent of people planting trees in the yard. And when I did construction work back when we had a construction company, we used to be like some of the first people in there because we did residential footings for houses. So we were like the first people. We'd go in, we'd put in the footing, then the brick masons would come place foundation on that, and then the house was framed up from there, either on a slab or a floor system. But like a lot of times we go into these neighborhoods, and what was once forested area was now clear cut. They would cut everything down, and they still do neighborhoods like that. They just clear cut everything, and it drives me nuts. It's like some of these oak trees and stuff are 100 years old, and you're in there just cutting them down, to put in houses for people, and that kind of annoys me. Like, why can't you just leave a few of them, build houses around it? But they come in, clear cut everything, and they build houses, and they plant a new tree in the front yard, which is hilarious. And it's like, there was hundreds of trees there to start with, and you could have just kept one, built the house, put the house there around it. But it's easier to just come in and clear cut for planning and development. But yeah, so I've always been kind of an environmentalist. If you want to say that makes me a bleeding heart Democrat, so be it. But I'm actually not. I'm a very centrist person. I don't identify political Republican or Democrat or Republican. I find myself in the middle. I find things on both sides that I agree with, and things on both sides I disagree with. Because it makes me a fence sitter or a flip flopper. But yeah, let me not get into politics, because I don't want to alienate part of my viewership. But yeah, I'm a big proponent for environmentalism. Especially like when I was a kid, when I was like 8 years old, I saw a seagull flying around, and it had a like one of those six-pack can of beer, six-pack of beer, the little plastic rings on it. I saw a seagull flying around with one of those stuck onto its neck, and it was actually tearing the feathers out of its neck when I was a kid on a beach in Florida, and that bothered me to that day. So, I've kind of always been an animal lover, environmentalist, kind of like, live and let live as far as that's concerned. So, yeah, so that's a few things about me. Bonus tidbit number 6. Sometimes when I get to rambling, it turns into like a 20+ minute video, but that happens. So once again, thank you everybody that made a video for this contest. Hopefully you learned a little bit something new about me, maybe something you didn't know. But yeah, I really appreciate all those video responses, and my challenge to those that didn't make video responses for the contest, to make a video response anyways, as a challenge, not as a contest response. And I'd definitely watch it, because I've enjoyed watching every single one so far. But yeah, thank you everybody for watching. Check me out on Sunday when I do the live drawing. Shouldn't be too long of a video, as long as I don't get to rambling with the people in chat, which has been known to happen, and I get on tangents and end up who knows where. Appreciate y'all watching. This is the Card Hobbyist. Y'all take it easy.